It was supposed to be the shortest war in American history, a swift, decisive strike against the terrorists who had shattered the skyline of New York. A message sent to the world that the United States does not bleed without consequence. But what began as a hunt for one man, hidden in the caves of Tora Bora, slowly, invisibly, transformed into something else entirely. Something that would swallow 2 decades, 7 presidents, and trillions of dollars, only to spit out nothing. How does a superpower spend 20 years fighting a war and lose to a group of men on donkeys? How does the most advanced military in human history spend $2 trillion and end up right back where it started, handing control to the very enemy it came to destroy? Let's go back to the beginning, to that moment of righteous fury. October 7th, 2001. The world watched as cruise missiles lit up the Afghan night. The goal was clear: dismantle al-Qaeda, capture Osama bin Laden, and punish the Taliban for harboring him. The American public was unified. Congress authorized force. NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in its history. It felt like a crusade, and in those first few months, it worked. The Taliban regime crumbled in a matter of weeks. Kabul fell. Kandahar fell. The caves of Tora Bora were bombed into rubble. Victory, it seemed, was just a press conference away. But then, something strange happened. The mission crept. It grew legs it was never supposed to have. The goal shifted from destroy al-Qaeda to build a stable, democratic Afghanistan. And that, right there, was the first crack in the foundation. You see, the United States was not built to be an empire of nation building. It was built for shock and awe, for overwhelming force, for getting in and getting out. But in Afghanistan, the generals started talking about schools, about hospitals, about women's rights, about a central government that could control a country that had never been controlled by anyone, not even Alexander the Great. And so the money began to flow. Not just military money, billions upon billions of dollars in aid, in reconstruction, in development. Money that was supposed to buy loyalty. Money that was supposed to build a future. But here's the question nobody wanted to ask. What happens when you pour trillions of dollars into a country that has no functioning banking system, no reliable infrastructure, and a culture where corruption is not a bug, it's a feature? The answer is, you create a monster. The CIA began paying warlords in cash. Suitcases full of $100 bills, flown in on cargo planes, handed over to men who had been fighting each other for decades. The idea was simple: buy their allegiance, turn them against the Taliban. But what actually happened was that those warlords took the money, built private armies, and started fighting each other for control of the drug trade. Afghanistan became the world's largest producer of heroin, and the United States, the world's most powerful nation, was now essentially funding both sides of a civil war. Meanwhile, the Taliban didn't disappear. They didn't surrender. They just waited. They slipped across the border into Pakistan, into the lawless tribal regions where the American military was not allowed to follow. They regrouped, they rearmed, and they watched as the Americans built bases. Giant, sprawling bases with Burger Kings, swimming pools, and air-conditioned tents. They watched as the Afghan government became a revolving door of corrupt officials who stole millions in aid money. They watched as the American people grew tired, as the news cycle moved on, as the war became a background hum. And they knew something that the Pentagon didn't want to admit. They weren't fighting for territory. They were fighting for time. Because time, in Afghanistan, has always been on the side of the patient. By 2010, the war had already lasted longer than World War II. The surge of troops under President Obama was supposed to break the stalemate. Instead, it broke the budget. At the height of the conflict, the United States was spending over $100 billion a year in Afghanistan. That's more than the entire GDP of the country, more than the entire economy of half the nations on Earth. And for what? For a government that couldn't even keep the lights on in Kabul without American generators. For an army that would desert by the thousands because they weren't being paid. For a peace process that was a joke, a charade, a performance for the cameras, while the Taliban infiltrated every level of the state. And then, the moment of truth came. The deal. The Doha Agreement. The United States, the superpower, sitting down with the Taliban, the enemy, and agreeing to a withdrawal timeline. No conditions, no guarantees, just a promise to leave. And the Taliban smiled, because they knew what the Americans refused to admit, that 20 years, trillions of dollars, and thousands of lives had bought exactly zero strategic results. The war would end exactly where it began, with the Taliban in power, with Al-Qaeda still operating, with the world wondering, what was it all for? And that question is the one that haunts every veteran who came home with a flag folded into a triangle, every family who got that knock on the door, every Afghan who believed, truly believed, that the world hadn't forgotten them. Because the withdrawal wasn't a retreat, it was a collapse. A domino effect so fast, so complete, that the world watched in disbelief as provinces fell like leaves in autumn, one by one, city by city, until there was only one left, Kabul. And when the Taliban walked into the presidential palace on August 15, 2021, they didn't fire a shot. The Afghan army had melted away. The president had fled. The Americans were scrambling at the airport, trying to evacuate, trying to save face, trying to pretend that this wasn't the ending they had written themselves. But it was. And the images will never leave us. The helicopters hovering over the embassy, the Chinooks lifting off with people clinging to the landing gear, the chaos, the desperation. The C-17 cargo plane taking off with human beings falling from the sky because they had nowhere else to go, because the country they had been promised was gone in 11 days. 11 days, after 20 years. And then, silence. The last American plane lifted off from Hamid Karzai International Airport at 11:59 p.m. on August 30th, 2021. 1 minute before the deadline. 1 minute before the 20th anniversary of 9/11. The war ended exactly where it began, with the Taliban in control, with Al-Qaeda still operating, with 13 American service members killed in a suicide bombing just days before, with billions of dollars of equipment left behind, with interpreters left behind, with allies left behind. So what was it all for? Was it for the schools, the ones that are now closed to girls? Was it for the hospitals, the ones that now lack supplies? Was it for the democracy, the one that collapsed before the ink on the Constitution was dry? Was it for the freedom, the one that vanished the moment the Taliban raised their white flag over the governor's mansion? No. It was for nothing. And that is the hardest truth to swallow. That a superpower spent 2 decades, $2 trillion, and over 2,000 lives, and achieved exactly nothing. The war didn't end with a victory. It didn't end with a treaty. It ended with a whimper, with a deadline, with a plane taking off into the night. And the world is left with one final image. The Taliban sitting in the same chairs, in the same rooms, making the same promises they made 20 years ago. And the Americans? Gone. Like they were never there. Like it never happened. Like all of it was just a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. Every bomb, every bullet, every broken promise. every mother who buried a son, every child who grew up knowing nothing but war. It was real. And when you strip away the flags, the speeches, the medals, the memorials, you're left with one cold, undeniable fact. The longest war in American history ended exactly the way it began, with nothing.